And now it's time for another Dice Tower review with Mike Vincent.
Okay, so moving on to the leadership sphere, we have a new attachment called the Doona Cache. So again, we see this recurring theme of Doona attachments for leadership, which give buffs and abilities to whoever it's attached to. So the Doona Cache has a cost of 2, is an item, and reads attached to a hero. Attached hero gains ranged. Action, pay 1 resource from the attached hero's pool to attach the Doona Cache to another hero. So this card is okay. It's not one that I've used very much historically. With the cost of 2, I think makes it a little bit prohibitive. And if I want to play ranged, I'm more likely to bring ranged heroes and ranged allies in the first place. So I'm going to bring Legolas, maybe Bard the Bowman, Bran Son of Bane, and so I don't often find the need to bring the Doona Cache along. However, there is one hero that I've noticed the Doona Cache combos well with, and this is Glorfindel for Spirit. So no, again, Glorfindel does not come in this adventure pack, but I feel he does combo well with this card. So with Glorfindel, because once you get a Light of Valinor on him and he no longer has to exhaust to commit to a quest, that means that suddenly he's committing to the quest for 3, but then he's ready during the combat phase. Now the problem is if you're playing him in a Spirit deck, we all know Spirit is not necessarily the best at combat. So we found when my wife and I would play, I would often play a tactics deck, she might play a Spirit deck, and oftentimes Glorfindel, once he had Light of Valinor, was just sort of sitting there and not really able to do too much. So once we threw Doona Cache on him, then suddenly he can put that very good 3 attack stat to good use by helping out by killing enemies. If you consider the Rivendell Blade can be placed on Glorfindel because he's Noldor, suddenly if you're reducing enemies' defense by 2 and attacking for 3, when you attach the Doona Cache to him, he becomes a very potent attacker, even if the Spirit partner isn't really engaging enemies all that much. So Doona Cache is not something I play very often. And perhaps in the comments, I'd be curious to hear, are there any heroes that you like to play Doona Cache with? And is this a card that you use very much? But one recommendation I would give is Spirit Glorfindel being a prime candidate for Doona Cache. So our next leadership card is also a Dine, and it's Dine Watcher. Has a cost of 3, has 1 willpower, 1 attack, 1 defense, and 2 hit points, and has the Dine trait. Reads response, discard Dine Watcher from play to cancel the shadow effect of a card just triggered. So Dine Watcher is not a card I'm often going to bring in my average leadership deck. I find her to be quite expensive with a cost of 3, and her stats and hit points to be very underwhelming with 1 each with 2 hit points. Now, there are certain quests though where you'll quickly notice shadow effect can be brutal, can really mess with your game, and in some cases end your game. And so if you know you're going into a quest which has particularly nasty shadow effects, then I do think Dine Watcher is a good option. She's just a really nice backup. If you have her on the table, you just know that at any time if you draw a crippling shadow effect, you can discard her, you can get rid of that shadow effect, and we do know that there are other cards in this game for allowing you to bring allies back into play. So if you have multiple copies of her, if you can potentially recycle her and bring her back into play somehow, well, this is going to give you the opportunity to cancel lots of different nasty shadow effects. So Dine Watcher, I think, has to be used in the right situation. I don't think this is an ally for most quests, but I do think if you're in a quest with nasty shadow effects, then a Dine Watcher is a good one to consider if you're playing leadership. The Dine keyword, though, is not something that's been overly developed yet as well at this point, so not a whole lot of synergies, but certainly being able to, at the last minute, save yourself and get rid of a brutal shadow effect is worth it. So there you have the Dine Watcher. Okay, so finally we're going to take a look at our Spirit cards, and we have a Spirit ally, a unique ally in Helm. Helm has a cost of 4, so quite expensive, but has 1 willpower, 2 attack, 2 defense, and 3 hit points. Has the Rohan and Warrior keywords, and reads, while Helm is ready, he gains response. After your threat is raised as a result of questing unsuccessfully or by an encounter or quest card effect, reduce your threat by 1. So Helm is a really good ally. I think that just fits in so well with the Spirit Sphere. We know that Spirit has a lot of cards for reducing threat, and so once again, Helm slides into this perfectly, and is a great card if you can just get him out and keep him out. Being able to reduce your threat in all of these instances by 1 is going to add up over the course of a game. We've already taken a look at our tactics hero Boromir, who raises his threat each turn, and so if you can find a way perhaps to make a tactics spirit deck, well then I think Helm would be a great card to include if you're going to be having a high threat. Frodo Baggins, of course, when he takes damage, can also be increased through threat. So Helm, I think, is another good ally to consider if you're playing a lot of cards that might be raising your threat. The other thing to consider is with the new Voice of Isengard and some of the new expansions, we've seen a lot more of the use of the Doomed keyword. So we know that increased threat is also going to be something we're going to see in the future. So with the further development of the Rohan trait, as well as having lots of Doomed X and other things that will be raising our threat, I think Helm is going to continue to be an ally that's going to see a lot of play. Is a bit prohibitive with his cost of 4, but has nice stats with 2 attack and 2 defense, and having 3 hit points makes him pretty beefy as well. So I think Helm is a great ally, especially if you're going to be playing a Rohan deck, but can also combo well with some of these other cards that involve increasing your threat. Helm, good card. So our last spirit card is called We Do Not Sleep. This is an event and reads action until the end of the phase. Rohan characters do not exhaust to commit to quests. So this is a great card if you're playing a Rohan deck and you have a ton of Rohan allies, you have your Rohan heroes, and this is for probably a desperate situation. If the staging area has a ton of threat, if you have a stage of the quest you really need to get through, or if you're at the end of the game, there's lots of enemies and locations, and you really just need to push through and you win the game, well, this is what this card is for. Very expensive with a cost of 5, but has great potential in that you're going to be able to commit all of your Rohan heroes and characters to the quest, and you know that if things go wrong or you don't manage to quest through, well, you're going to have them for attacking and defending and dealing with enemies as well. So a very good card, something you're probably only going to want to bring if you have a lot of Rohan keyword, as this card is very expensive with 5, but it does say that all Rohan characters, so this can include you and your partners, so if you each have some Rohan, and I think we're going to continue to see the further development of the Rohan keyword in the next Saga expansion. So I think this card is just going to become more valuable and just has a very powerful effect. So certainly in the right situation, a very good card. All right, so the last card for this pack is just continuing a prior theme. This is a neutral card and is the Song of Battle. Has a cost of 1, is a song, and reads attached to a hero. Attached hero gains the tactics resource icon. So this continues the thread of cards we've seen that do the same thing, the different songs that basically really help smooth out your deck if you're playing a dual sphere or tri-sphere. So if you have some tactics, then obviously being able to give this to a non-tactics hero, it's just going to make it easier for you to pay for tactics cards. I like to play a lot of tactics leadership decks, and so I find this is a great one if I'm going to play the Steward of Gondor, as leadership has a lot of cards that will generate resources, and so if I can put this on a leadership hero, I find usually it ends up with lots of extra resources for tactics. One thing I like about tactics, though, is I find a lot of their cards are pretty cheap, but if you're saving up for that Citadel plate or something, the Song of Battle is going to make that easier if you're playing a dual or multi-sphere deck. So not a whole lot about to say about the Song of Battle, other than it's certainly a useful card if you're playing dual or tri-sphere with tactics. Okay, so that concludes the 5th adventure pack in the Shadows of Mirkwood cycle, and I'm going to take a look at my top 3 cards from this adventure pack. So clearly Boromir, I think, is a good choice. One of the best heroes in this game. He did not make my top 10, but was very close. Just being able to ready multiple times in a turn is a very powerful ability. He has great stats, lots of hit points, and if you need to, you can discard him and do 2 damage to every enemy engaged with the player. Certainly something that could come in handy in the right instance. So Boromir, certainly one of the best cards in this adventure pack. Fast Hitch an amazing card. In my opinion, one of the best Hobbit cards in the game, particularly as there's multiple copies of this. So in theory, you can have all 3 of your Hobbit heroes acting twice around, which is amazing. And with a cost of 1, just makes this a very viable card. So no doubt this was an easy pick for my top 3. And I do think Helm is a very good Rohan ally. He is expensive, but when you consider he's going to be readied while you're committing to the quest, so any A, if you quest unsuccessfully, or B, if there's cards coming off the counter deck that raise your threat, he's really going to help mitigate that and by lowering it. But then with his 2 attack and 2 defense and 3 hit points, you can then put him to good use during the combat phase to help clean up some enemies or block some enemies. So I think he is one of the better Rohan allies that I've seen so far. So there you have it. Those are my top 3 cards for this pack. Next week, we're going to be finishing up with the final pack in this series. So that's good, making it through our first set of 6 adventure packs. Afterwards, I'm going to take a look at, I think, the Hobbit saga expansions. So you can look forward to those. As a buyer's guide, I highly recommend this pack. I think there's some really good cards. I think Boromir is a great hero, obviously. Fast Hitch is amazing for Hobbit decks. You have Eagle cards, you have the Song, you have Rohan. Just a lot of the key traits in this game really seem to have some key cards in this adventure pack. So I would highly recommend picking up the Dead Marshes. So next week, we will go through the final pack, and I'm also hoping in the future to take a look at the other 2 Nightmare decks from Season 1, so you can stay tuned for those as well. So thanks very much, have a great week, and we will talk to you next week.
Thanks so much for watching the Dice Tower videos. Find more great videos and reviews, as well as our top-rated audio podcast at Dicetower.com. You can also find other great shows at Dicetowernetwork.com. I'm Eric Summerer, and you've been watching The Dice Tower. The Dice Tower is sponsored by Cool Stuff Inc., where you can find great games for great prices. Cool stuff in stock. Check them out at CoolStuffInc.com.